What if everything you thought was yours, your home, your money, your perfect life, vanished overnight? Diana had it all: a wealthy husband, a secret lover, a life of luxury and control. But when her double life spirals out of control, she wakes up to find her world shattered beyond repair. The house, sold behind her back, the bank accounts, empty, and the man she betrayed, gone without a trace, leaving her with nothing but the ruins of her own choices. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. Diana lounged gracefully in her tastefully decorated Staten Island apartment, the distant murmur of the city seeping through the windows like an unspoken secret. Inside, the space was serene, almost deceptively so, belying the tempest of thoughts swirling within her mind. Under the soft glow of the living room's dim lighting, her dark eyes gleamed as she swirled the deep red liquid in her glass before taking a measured sip. Each taste was an opportunity for contemplation, a moment to reflect on the choices that had brought her to this very evening. Across from her, Cyrus sprawled lazily on the couch, his relaxed demeanor laced with the irresistible charm that had ensnared her from the start. His lean frame stretched effortlessly across the cushions, the smirk on his lips tinged with amusement. From the instant they had met, he had slipped seamlessly into her world, an exhilarating reprieve from the tedium of her marriage. He was everything Jacob, her husband, was not: unpredictable, passionate, electric. "Money is never an issue," Diana remarked smoothly, her tone unwavering. She set her glass down with casual precision, a flicker of mischief dancing in her gaze. "Jacob takes care of everything. He's my walking trust fund. All you need to do is keep me entertained." Cyrus's brow arched, his grin widening at her audacity. "And you think he'll stay in the dark?" he asked, his voice laced with amusement. Crossing one leg over the other, Diana leaned back, her stare unwavering. "Jacob? He's drowning in work. As far as he knows, I'm the picture-perfect wife. He suspects nothing." Cyrus let out a low chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. She maneuvered this double life with astonishing ease. "But what if he does?" he pressed, his curiosity piqued. She waved a dismissive hand, exuding confidence. "He won't. Jacob's entire world revolves around his career. To him, I'm just another piece of his curated success, a polished wife to display at corporate galas." A glimmer of defiance flickered in her expression, the thrill of deception only adding to her exhilaration. Cyrus shifted forward, closing the distance between them with deliberate ease. Taking the glass from her hand, he placed it aside, his voice a teasing murmur. "And what does that make you?" Holding his gaze, Diana's lips curled into a knowing smile. "A woman who always gets what she wants." His fingers brushed over her shoulders, pulling her closer, their faces inches apart. "And what is it that you want?" he murmured. A sharp breath caught in her throat before she whispered against his lips. "You." Their affair was a calculated escape, one she had meticulously nurtured over time. Diana had long outgrown the life she had built with Jacob. She yearned for intensity, spontaneity, something beyond regimented schedules and lifeless dinner conversations. With Cyrus, she rediscovered the woman she had once been, the woman she longed to be again. As their lips collided in a fervent, urgent kiss, the weight of their secret only heightened the moment's intensity. His hands traced the contours of her body, and she responded in kind, pulling him closer still. For now, the outside world ceased to exist. As Cyrus's fingers trailed down her spine, sending ripples of sensation through her, her mind drifted briefly to the future, their upcoming getaway to Hawaii. Days bathed in golden sunlight by the infinity pool, nights wrapped in indulgence, every luxury effortlessly funded by Jacob's relentless dedication to his work. He wouldn't suspect a thing. The thought only fueled her anticipation. The sudden vibration of her phone against the coffee table shattered the moment. With a sigh, Diana reached for it, her eyes flicking to the screen. A message from Jacob. Working late again. Don't wait up. A smirk tugged at her lips as she turned the screen toward Cyrus. See? Completely oblivious. Cyrus glanced at the message before meeting her gaze, his grin resurfacing. So, Hawaii? She leaned into him, nodding. Hawaii. Their plans for the escape continued to unfold, each new detail only heightening the anticipation. The rift between her and Jacob had grown too vast to mend, and in that space, Diana had carved out her own freedom. With Cyrus, she felt more alive than she had in years. For a fleeting moment, her mind wandered back to the past. She had met Jacob fresh out of college, drawn to his ambition, his unwavering determination to build a future. Together, they had constructed a life that, on the surface, seemed flawless. But time had eroded the connection between them, leaving Diana as little more than an ornament in his carefully structured world. Meeting Cyrus had changed everything. He was Jacob's opposite in every way, bold, spontaneous, and most importantly, present. With him, she wasn't confined to a role. She was a woman who still had fire in her soul. She had played the part of the devoted wife for long enough. Now, she was ready for something different, something more. Cyrus's voice pulled her back to reality. I've been checking out resorts in Maui, he said, showing her images on his phone. This one has a private beach, infinity pools, the works. Her lips curled in anticipation. The future stretched before her, glistening with promise, unburdened by consequence, and she intended to seize it all. Diana leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming with intrigue. That looks amazing, she whispered, a thrill creeping into her voice. Picture it, lounging by the pool all day with a cocktail in hand, and our nights. Well, you know. Cyrus's smirk deepened as he pulled her closer. I like the way you think, he murmured. What about flights? She pressed, already imagining the Hawaiian sun warming her skin. Next week, he answered without hesitation. I'll handle everything tonight. A slow smile spread across Diana's lips as she envisioned the ocean breeze and the golden sand beneath her toes, a stark contrast to the rigid structure of her life in New York. I'll tell Jacob it's a girl's trip. He won't question it. As the evening stretched on, their anticipation grew with each detail they mapped out. For Diana, this wasn't just a getaway. It was an escape, a dream come to life. And best of all, Jacob would remain blissfully unaware. By the time Cyrus left the following morning, Diana's mind had already drifted to Hawaii. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she thought about the life she had built with Jacob. For years, she had fulfilled her role as the devoted wife, slipping effortlessly into expectations, only to realize how little say she had in her own life. Jacob had never asked her what she wanted. He had simply assumed she would always be there. Now, for the first time, she was making her own choices, and Cyrus was part of that. After a brief pause, she reached for her phone and typed a message to Jacob. Just finished up here. See you tomorrow, maybe? His reply came almost instantly, as predictable as ever. Sure. Got a big presentation in the morning. Don't stay up too late. A smirk played on her lips. So predictable. It was almost laughable how easily she deceived him. Setting the phone aside, she slipped beneath the sheets, pushing all thoughts of Jacob from her mind. Her thoughts turned instead to sunlit shores, the feel of Cyrus's arms around her, the rhythmic crash of waves. This was what she wanted. It was all within reach. The days in Maui were as blissful as she had imagined. The island was paradise, lush, indulgent, and intoxicating. She and Cyrus spent their afternoons basking under the sun, sipping on tropical cocktails, surrendering to every pleasure the island had to offer. They dined in the finest restaurants, sailed on private yachts, and uncovered the island's hidden wonders. She reveled in the extravagance, allowing the life she had left behind to fade into insignificance. One afternoon, after a lavish breakfast by the pool, she sat beside Cyrus, watching the waves roll onto the shore. The sun warmed her skin, and she let out a deep sigh of contentment. "This is everything." Cyrus shot her a teasing glance. "All thanks to that paycheck waiting for you back home, huh?" Diana laughed, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Exactly. And the best part? Jacob's probably drowning in work right now, completely oblivious to all of this." Cyrus leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. He has no idea what he's missing. As the days passed, their time in Hawaii became a blur of indulgence and passion. For the first time in years, Diana wasn't defined by Jacob's career or society's expectations. She felt liberated, vibrant, alive in a way she hadn't in ages. With Cyrus, she had discovered a life unburdened by duty and pretense, one that fed her hunger for freedom. But as their vacation neared its end, a quiet unease settled over her. The secrecy, the thrill, the exhilaration, it had all been intoxicating. And yet, deep down, she knew it couldn't last forever. She couldn't keep reality at bay indefinitely. Still, she wondered, was there a way to hold on to this? To maintain the balance between the woman she was with Cyrus and the wife she was expected to be with Jacob? The flight back to New York felt unbearably long. The silence of the cabin only amplified the questions racing through her mind. The magic of Maui had faded, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. She had worn the mask of Jacob's perfect wife for so long, yet now she felt like a stranger in her own life. Was it Cyrus she had fallen for, or the liberation he represented? Was it the secrecy that thrilled her, or was she simply exhausted from being an accessory to Jacob's ambitions? A gentle touch pulled her from her thoughts, Cyrus's hand resting on hers, grounding her for a fleeting moment. She met his gaze, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "It'll all be fine," he reassured her, though his voice lacked conviction. "You've got it all under control. Jacob won't suspect a thing." She nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The rush of the affair was wearing thin, leaving behind the weight of reality. Could she sustain this double life? Could she continue pretending? As the plane touched down and they moved through the terminal, a sense of inevitability settled over her. The fantasy was over. Reality awaited. Standing in front of her brownstone, she hesitated. It was all so familiar, the pristine facade, the comfortable routine. Yet, as she reached for the door, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was stepping back into her old life or leaving something behind. Diana's chest tightened as she stepped onto the pavement, her breath catching at the sight before her. A moving truck rumbled idly at the curb, workers carting out furniture and taped-up boxes. Her furniture, her boxes. A cold wave of dread crashed over her. What was happening? She rushed forward, her voice laced with urgency as she confronted one of the movers. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" she demanded, her pulse thrumming in her ears. The man barely spared her a glance, continuing his work with an air of indifference. "Just finishing up. The new owners will be here soon." The word struck like a physical blow. "New owners?" she repeated, her voice faltering. The mover's brow furrowed slightly, as if puzzled by her confusion. "Yeah. Sale went through a couple of weeks ago. Your husband handled everything." Her stomach plummeted. Jacob. A sick realization settled over her like a shroud. He had sold their house, their home, without a single word, without a warning. The betrayal twisted inside her, leaving her breathless. She stumbled through the front door, her eyes darting around the nearly empty rooms. It was unrecognizable. The warmth, the memories, the sense of security, all of it had been stripped away. A few abandoned boxes lined the walls, lonely remnants of a life that no longer existed. In the center of the living room stood a young couple, beaming with excitement. "Diana, right?" the woman said cheerfully. "We just bought the house last week." A crushing weight pressed against Diana's chest. "I didn't sell the house," she managed, her voice thick with disbelief. "There has to be some mistake." The man's expression turned cautious as he flipped through a folder in his hands. "No mistake," he said after a moment. "Your husband signed all the paperwork. You might want to talk to him." A nauseating dread coiled in her stomach. "Where is he?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The couple exchanged an uncertain glance. "We don't know," the woman admitted. "The realtor handled everything remotely." With shaking fingers, Diana pulled out her phone and dialed Jacob's number. The call rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. Panic clawed at her as she opened her banking app, her heart hammering wildly. Her accounts were empty, every last dollar gone. A dizzying sense of horror swept over her. Jacob hadn't just walked away, he had erased her life. Her home, her savings, her stability vanished in an instant. She staggered back outside, her thoughts spiraling into chaos. He hadn't just abandoned her, he had destroyed her. Fueled by a desperate mix of fear and fury, she flagged down a cab and directed it to the nearest police station. Someone had to help her. Someone had to stop him. But as she sat at the front desk, pouring out her story, the officer barely looked up from his paperwork. "We'll look into it," he muttered dismissively, already moving on to something else. The weight of hopelessness settled over her as she walked back out into the night. How was she supposed to track down a man who had erased every trace of himself? How was she supposed to rebuild when everything had been taken from her? Determined, she launched her own search. She visited the realtor's office, demanding answers, but all she got was the same story. Jacob had finalized the sale through emails and phone calls, no in-person meetings, no forwarding address, just a ghost in the system. She reached out to friends, old co-workers, anyone who might have seen him. No one had any answers. It was as if he had ceased to exist, leaving only wreckage in his wake. Days turned into weeks, and her desperation grew with each passing moment. She scraped together what little money she had left to hire a private investigator, but even he came back empty-handed. Her once stable world had crumbled, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't put it back together. And then, even Cyrus, the one person she had leaned on, began to slip away. One night, in the dim glow of their cramped motel room, he exhaled heavily. "We need to talk." Diana barely looked up from the growing pile of unpaid bills. "What now?" He rubbed a hand over his face, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "I can't keep doing this. We're out of money, Diana. We need a plan, or I don't know how much longer I can stay." Tears burned her eyes. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I'm doing everything I can to find him." But deep down, she knew the truth. She was chasing a ghost. As weeks bled into months, survival became her only focus. She sold off her last possessions, maxed out her credit cards, did whatever she could to keep going. The social circles she had once belonged to now turned their backs, unwilling to acknowledge her downfall. Everything she had was gone. And Jacob had left her to gather the shattered remains alone. Cyrus, too, had reached his limit. The relentless cycle of hardship, the unyielding pressure, and the mounting financial strain had drained him completely. One evening, without uttering a word, he packed his belongings and left. Just like Jacob before him, he vanished, leaving Diana to fend for herself. The solitude that followed was absolute. Those she had once depended on were gone, and she was left to navigate a world that had become unrecognizable. The years ahead were cruel, each day a battle, each moment a stark reminder of how far she had fallen. The life she once knew, filled with comfort and security, had become a distant memory, replaced by a struggle for mere survival. Yet, despite everything, her resolve never wavered. No matter how much time passed, she remained fixated on one goal: finding Jacob. She needed to see him again, to demand answers, to understand why he had abandoned her. 11 relentless years slipped by, reshaping her into someone she hardly recognized. The luxuries of her past were gone, replaced by a day-to-day existence that demanded every ounce of her strength. And still, she searched, unwilling to let go of the past. At last, a clue surfaced, a whisper of his presence in a quiet town, far from the world they once shared. Clutching what remained of her savings, she purchased a ticket and embarked on the journey. The town was nothing like the bustling city where she had thrived. It was serene, with winding streets and a gentle stillness that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her past. As she wandered through its unfamiliar roads, her heart pounded with anticipation and fear, her eyes scanning desperately for any sign of him. Her search led her to a modest house on the town's outskirts, the very place her information suggested he now lived. As she stood at the gate, an unease settled deep in her chest. And then she saw him. Jacob was in the yard, playing with 2 young children, their laughter filling the air. His face, once familiar, was alight with a joy she hadn't seen in years. A woman stood nearby, watching with a quiet smile, her presence radiating warmth and contentment. For an instant, a sharp pang of jealousy coursed through Diana, but beneath it lay something deeper, an aching emptiness. The future she had once imagined with Jacob was now someone else's reality. It had slipped from her grasp, lost to the years that had passed without him. She stood frozen, watching the life that might have been hers unfold before her, now impossibly out of reach. She waited, biding her time until he was alone. When he finally stepped away from the house, she took a steadying breath and called his name. He turned abruptly, his gaze landing on her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "What are you doing here?" His voice was devoid of warmth. "I had to find you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Jacob, I've been through so much. Please, can we talk?" His posture stiffened, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, she thought she saw something familiar in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, but just as quickly, it disappeared. "There's nothing to talk about," he replied, his tone firm. "You made your choice. You walked away." Her throat tightened, tears threatening to spill. "Please, Jacob. I know I made mistakes, but I never meant for things to end this way. Can't you at least forgive me?" His face remained impassive, his voice unwavering. "I've moved on. I have a family now. I'm happy. And you should be too. There's nothing left for you here." His words struck her with brutal finality. The man she had loved, the life she had longed to reclaim, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a man who no longer had space for her in his world. Jacob cast one last glance in her direction before turning away, walking back toward the house that was no longer theirs. She remained there as the sun dipped below the horizon, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. The past was lost to time, and the future stretched before her as a vast, uncertain void. Alone once more, she was left with nothing but the heavy burden of her regrets. This story has come to an end. You can spend years building an illusion, deceiving others and yourself, but the truth always finds a way to surface. And when it does, everything you thought was stable can crumble in an instant. This story teaches us that you cannot build real happiness on deception, because when you betray others, you ultimately betray yourself. True happiness comes from honesty, loyalty, and hard work, not from shortcuts and empty thrills. Value what you have, stay true to yourself, and remember, life always brings justice, one way or another. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you